Good evening to all the colleagues from the Jialing branch of China Construction Bank. This training program, co-organized by Tsinghua University and the Jilin China Construction Bank, focuses on the core concepts of leadership art and scientific decision-making. Its aim is to help everyone improve their personal cultivation and leadership abilities. These aspects are mostly considered from the perspective of a professional. But as individuals, what are your own intrinsic needs? I know as financial industry professionals, your income level is relatively high compared to similar industries in China. However, the pace is fast and pressure is also relatively high. After more than 30 years of China's reform and opening up policy, our living conditions have already improved tremendously compared to previous decades. But I would like to ask everyone here, who among you has ever truly, from the very bottom of your heart, at any point in your life, felt real happiness? I have also asked this question to many people around me, including my colleagues and friends. But everyone does seem rather confused by the complexities of society. No one has truly and deeply felt their own happiness. Perhaps we were happier when we were younger and more innocent, more attuned to the simple truths of life. So today, we are extremely honored to have invited a highly respected Buddhist master. He will use his wisdom from Tibetan Buddhism to help us unlock the path to happiness. Now let me first introduce the esteemed master we have invited today. The esteemed master we have invited today is Khenpo Sodargye, the great Khenpo of the Han Monks Division at Larunga 5 Sciences Buddhist Academy in Sichuan. First, I would like to explain to everyone what Khenpo means. Khenpo is a Tibetan Buddhist title for those who preside over conferring precepts. It is similar to the position of abbot in Han Chinese Buddhist temples. Khenpo Sodargye is an inheritor of the Vajrayana Buddhist tradition. For years, he has taken on both teaching and administrative duties for the Han Monks Division at the Buddhist Academy, but has also been dedicated to sharing the profound and precious wisdom of Tibetan Buddhism to the Han Chinese regions and even to Chinese-speaking communities around the world. Khenpo has persisted in translating a vast number of scriptures and treatises, and to date, his published works amount to tens of millions of words. He has had a very broad influence both domestically and internationally. In recent years, Khenpo has used the internet, video platforms, Weibo, and other media, and various modern technological means to widely spread the Dharma and reach out to devoted followers. On Weibo alone, Khenpo has as many as 880,000 followers. In addition to spreading the Dharma, Khenpo has also been actively involved in promoting social welfare and charitable work for many years. Now may I ask everyone to please stand and give a warm round of applause to welcome Khenpo Sodargye.
Today we are gathered here to hold a brief lecture for everyone. Before we begin the lecture, I believe the organizers have already informed everyone that I will probably be sharing with you for about an hour or so, followed by an interactive session. Today is also quite a rather special day. Today is July 17th. This is actually known as World Care Day. On this day last year, I had the opportunity to attend and participate in a remarkable event, the World Care Forum, which was held in the city of Beijing. The theme at that time was caring for the environment, caring for life. That was the theme. I remember that I also made a heartfelt appeal to everyone back then, reaching out to all of you. That caring for life is not just about caring for human life. There are so many forms of life around us, including animals, and every life is valuable and extremely precious. Therefore, as human beings endowed with great wisdom, we must start with small actions to care for all forms of life around us. At the same time, we should care for the earth and the environment in which all of humanity lives. Speaking of this, when it comes to caring for the environment, everyone here should be aware that our environment today has suffered extremely severe damage. Where does this destruction come from? It often comes from our desires, from people's excessive greed and attachment in particular. So, how can we actually put a stop to such desires in our lives? I think that today's theme, which is called The Wealth Rooted in Your Heart, is especially meaningful. It is closely related to this issue. So, from what perspective should we try to comprehend or truly understand inner wealth, especially in our lives or daily experiences? Everyone here should be aware that so-called wealth can be divided into external wealth and internal wealth. That is to say, inner wealth refers to our spiritual wealth, including qualities such as wisdom, conviction, faith, deep compassion, and other important virtues that guide our actions and shape our character in meaningful ways. All of these belong to the wealth of the heart. As for external wealth, it refers to what people often desire, such as houses, cars, money, luxury items, and so forth. These are all forms of external wealth. What is their current condition? Of most people in the world today, many of you here who are in high positions should be very clear about this. People nowadays tend to place far more emphasis on external achievements and possessions, while the richness of inner wealth is gradually being neglected.
Relying on external wealth to obtain happiness and joy for oneself is actually extremely difficult. In other words, we keep searching and continuously and persistently pursuing external material wealth. But in reality, it is something we can never truly attain. There was once a very wealthy man who told a poor farmer, "You can try to walk just as far as you can, and all the land you cover within your reach will truly be yours." As a result, this farmer kept running forward, running and running. He ran himself to death from exhaustion, but he was never willing to rest, always wanting to keep running. In the same way, if we truly try to satisfy ourselves with external wealth, it is indeed extremely difficult. Therefore, if our lives are kept relatively straightforward and simple, grounded in frugality and modesty, we may find that we will experience a sense of contentment and happiness within ourselves. At such times, it can be said that there is truly a sense of fulfillment in our hearts. Too much gold disturbs the mind. In stillness, one sees the true nature. Back in the Tang dynasty, there was a layman named Pang Yun. He deliberately threw all of his personal belongings, every single one of his cherished possessions, into the swiftly flowing river. Afterwards, he composed a very famous verse. The meaning was that as people accumulate more and more wealth, in reality, their minds become increasingly disturbed and they ultimately lose a true sense of values. Nowadays, people's values are entirely based on material things. If we don't understand this principle, we might spend our whole lives from childhood until the moment we finally leave this world, sometimes even desperately chasing after it. When we were young, maybe just a very simple piece of clothing or a very simple meal could make you very happy. Even during the Chinese New Year or other festivals, a very simple life could in fact bring you great joy. But now, in such a materially abundant society today, even the finest, most exquisite delicacies and all kinds of gold and silver treasures may not necessarily bring you true happiness in your heart. So now we should understand that if people are always, consistently and continually seeking or searching for happiness, joy, or contentment from external things, sources, or circumstances, according to Einstein's well-known values, this is called a pigsty ideal. I don't really know if any of you here have ever actually learned or heard about the so-called pigsty ideal. What is the pigsty ideal? We all know that the pigs and dogs in a pigsty are actually only interested in eating, drinking, surrounded by the stench of dung and filth. Apart from this, there is no higher or more noble spiritual pursuit. There is no spiritual happiness or fulfillment, or in other words, the concept of being content with less and having fewer desires. In Buddhism, this is called all conditioned existence is suffering. That is to say, this kind of happiness is actually not truly joyful. People should have pursuits beyond just food and drink, and reach significantly deeper and higher levels spiritually on a personal level. In reality, the overall moral standard of society has not been fully elevated because trying to satisfy people's desires entirely through external means is in fact extremely difficult. All of you who are present here in this room should be fully aware of that some futurists, after conducting research and investigations, speaking from the perspective of today's society, have found that people's desires are growing ever larger. The resources on Earth are increasingly unable to meet our demands. Long ago in the past, the renowned leader of India, Mahatma Gandhi, also once said, "The Earth just provides resources to satisfy our basic needs, but it cannot fully satisfy us. If our desires are especially great, it cannot fully satisfy us. Therefore, many futurists believe that if everyone were to reach the standard of living in the United States, people's desires and aspirations around the world would only continue to grow. If we were truly to achieve the standard of living of today's society in America, even 20 Earths would not be enough to meet the demand. This is probably true. It is often said that, as of recent years, there are now well over 40 million cars currently in China, according to various reports. And these more than 40 million cars are spread throughout the major cities. Traffic jams are common. Even on highways, congestion happens frequently. If we were really to reach the American standard of living, in the US, basically there is one car for every 2 people on average. For China to reach that level, there would actually have to be 700 million vehicles. Some scholars evaluated if all the vehicles in every city were piled up together, it would be as high as the Himalayas. This kind of consumption and energy development would cause tremendous harm to the natural world. So if we think that everyone all around the world is willing to live like people in Western countries, that would be absolutely extremely difficult. Because right now, in many developing countries, people's desires are truly endless. By comparison, the overall sense of satisfaction in developed countries is a bit better. Of course, in countries like Bhutan, where everyone has their own sense of fulfillment, it's actually not that hard for our lives to reach our ultimate expectations. I've been to Bhutan before. In Bhutan, people's lives are very simple. From the homes they live in to the cars they drive, their lives are very simple, without the intense desires found in big cities. But in their very pure and simple environment, they live really happy and truly joyful lives. And life in all its aspects, including family, carries a profound sense of meaning and purpose. But in the cities, many of you present here today have likely felt this on a very personal level. Although people own more and more resources and wealth than ever before, families actually become less harmonious and people feel especially restless inside. Moreover, many so-called successful people nowadays, for the sake of their careers and work, for the sake of all kinds of achievements, they work relentlessly and tirelessly day and night, without any stop. In the end, it's only on the day they die that they might finally get to rest. Besides that, there's hardly even a chance to talk with your own family, or to enjoy a generally, perhaps relatively peaceful, calm, and comfortable life. On one hand, our desires are immense. On the other hand, most of our current goals and ongoing efforts are all for ourselves. If our mindset or attachment could shift toward benefiting society and giving back to society, then actually we wouldn't really feel so much pain deep inside, not as much as we do now. And in addition, the overall atmosphere of harmony in all aspects would continue to keep improving. You might know that in the United States there is a very famous man named Mr. Fuller. When Mr. Fuller was just very young, he had a dream one night. What was his dream? He had this kind of idea that he was determined to earn 10 million US dollars. So he started working desperately to make money and had already earned over $1 million. When he had made over $1 million, he felt hopeful, but his family started having problems because he didn't have time to take care of his family members. At the same time, every day he was struggling and working hard for his job. By this point, he was already physically and mentally exhausted, suffering greatly and in a lot of pain. He was on the verge of collapse, and at that moment, he changed his mindset. He thought, even if I earn $10 million, if I keep it all just to myself, it actually doesn't really make sense. I must use all of my wealth for the benefit of society. Later, he made a vow that he would definitely, without any doubt, build a place called Home for Humanity. Ever since he made this great vow with determination, the atmosphere in his family also changed and became very harmonious. At the same time, he began to work hard for this goal every day. During the process of striving for this, all the physical and mental exhaustion and pain he used to feel completely disappeared. And unexpectedly, in a very short period of time, he really did start earning more and more money. Even the President of the United States at the time was very supportive of him. It should have been Carter, who was very supportive. and the President of the United States participated in his volunteer activities, wearing their work clothes to participate in their volunteer work as part of their daily routine. Later, by that time, he had already built more than 60,000 houses, providing safe, secure, and supportive homes for over 300,000 homeless people in need. From this example, it shows that many people here today probably really don't lack anything in their own lives. But what is lacking now more than anything is a sense of compassion. This compassion, to some extent, needs to be given back to society. This is truly necessary. Some people might think, right now I may not have this yet. When I become a great philanthropist someday and make a lot of money, then I'll donate a portion to society. In fact, donating money and investing are essentially the same thing. What matters most is having a genuine desire in your heart to help others. With such a kind and gentle heart, its influence will naturally bring about a gentle transformation in our body and mind. Whether it's towards family, at work, or with colleagues, the truth is many people are very selfish. You may have in fact become aware of this, or perhaps you haven't. No matter they are the top level leaders or ordinary people at the grassroots level, everyone, literally from morning till night, is constantly striving, fighting for their own happiness and each and every personal interest. If things go on like this, in a country where selfishness is so strong, it's true that no matter what you do, you probably won't really ever feel completely secure. Therefore, for each of us, to completely change all aspects of society is of course extremely difficult. But we should each of us stand firmly in our own position, no matter what kind of leader you are or what organization you're in. In fact, for many things, we may need to observe for a long time. If we don't take the time to observe closely, on the surface, it may seem that everyone here is quite wealthy, but perhaps deep down, they are actually very poor. I often think that some people appear very rich on the outside, but are very poor inside. Some people are rich inside, but poor on the outside. Just like some practitioners, they are completely filled with joy and wisdom within, but their outward appearance may be very simple. Some people are poor both inside and out, while others are wealthy both inside and out. We humans can't tell just by looking at the surface. Even if you are a billionaire, a great king, or an individual of exceptionally high status and considerable wealth, no matter how much power you possess, maybe deep down inside, you are actually extremely poor. There is a story like this in Buddhism. In the past, there was a wealthy, wise, and respected elder named Sigalovada, a notable figure as mentioned in the Buddhist scriptures. He was actually a great benefactor, what we would now call a billionaire. This wealthy billionaire had a truly very fine, exquisite golden box made of red sandalwood. At that time in India, this beautiful golden box was considered extremely precious. Then he announced to everyone that he intended to give this incredibly rare and extremely valuable treasure to someone who was the poorest person in the world. After that, many very poor people from all over the world came to see him. When they came before him, he looked at each of them, at these beggars. One by one he said, "It seems that you are not the poorest. The person I choose as the poorest is actually the king of our country." At that time, the king of their country was called King Prasenajit. He said that the poorest people in our country is exactly our king. I will give it to him when the time comes. The message spread fast. One tells 10 and 10 tell 100. Eventually the message spread throughout the country. Later the message eventually reached the ears of the king. The king was absolutely furious and immediately, without hesitation, sent people to arrest the elder. He was brought before the king, who angrily said, "You told so many people that I am the poorest. What do you mean by that? Look at my warehouses filled with so much gold, silver, and treasures. Why do you judge me as the poorest person?" Then the elder said, "I did indeed say that you are the poorest person. But let me explain why I said that. Although your warehouses are filled with gold, silver, and treasures, these golden treasures should belong to the people who are suffering terribly. There are so many poor people, but you are unwilling to give anything to them. They should be for your family, but you haven't given them anything. If you enjoy everything alone, your heart remains impoverished, poorer than all these people. That is why I want to entrust this most precious thing to you, the poorest person in the world. At this moment, the king thought about it and realized it was true. On one hand, he felt no sense of fulfillment in his heart and was actually more pitiful and impoverished than the beggars of the world. On the other hand, all the wealth he possessed was not really earned by his own ability. It should belong to all the people. From that moment on, he listened to what was said to him. He immediately opened the national treasury and began distributing alms. He generously gave away all his wealth to the people throughout the country. Therefore, by looking at this example, we can also see that everyone present here, despite the merit and karmic affinity of each person, are different. Regardless of whether it is in domestic banks or in financial institutions abroad, definitely has a lot of savings. Some of these are only known to themselves, while some are known to their families. Because nowadays in Switzerland and Singapore, I've met many people from Swiss and Singapore in banks. They told me, our countries are supported by some numbered deposits from people in some countries around the world. It happens that for some people who hold numbered accounts in countries like Switzerland, after they passed away for several years, their funds may be transferred to government custody. I've met quite a few people who seem to be insiders working at various banks. They all felt that this was a very good method. Recently, I met someone from Singapore, and he said, following the Swiss approach, now we have opened large-scale casinos and set up international banks. Now we don't have to put in much effort. A lot of resources just come to us naturally. He said that. So it's possible that since in today's society things are quite complicated, even within a family, nobody really knows each other's bank passwords. People keep their own separate savings just in case something happens. They do this to leave themselves a way out. Society has already become like this now. Why is it that nowadays when you buy a house, it has to be signed by two people and both have to notarize it? Because society today is experiencing an increasing number of negative circumstances, complex situations, and disturbing phenomena. So I may not know what kind of wealth each of you present here holds. Maybe some of you are very wealthy and some of you might not be so well off. But no matter what, I think that during your lifetime, your wealth, aside from serving your own needs for food and daily living, should also contribute in some way to those around you and society. When we talk about making a contribution, it doesn't necessarily mean you have to hold a charity gala or that you must donate a certain amount at a charity dinner. In fact, even if you just help a college student or help someone who is living in poverty, that is also considered an act of contribution. Because if people develop this kind of habit from a young age, from the perspective of Buddhist principle of karma and retribution, you will naturally find that over time, many valuable resources and wonderful merits will come your way. I once read an article about Cao De Wang, who is the well-known founder and chairman of Fuyao Group. In one introduction, it actually said, he is a devout Buddhist. He believes good deeds are rewarded and evil punished. And over the past few years, actually, he has dedicated a special portion of his wealth to charity, which is about 1.5 billion yuan. This is his way of making contribution. Even though he does business and engages in worldly activities to make money, this is quite natural, and Buddhism also approves of it. Whether you are a businessman or any kind of social worker, engaging in such worldly professions is completely acceptable and proper. However, your methods cannot be all about selfish and harmful to others. If you bring suffering to others, society, or even all other living beings on earth, then it would be more than fair to say that this is extremely unreasonable by any standard. So now, I would like to say to every one of you present here today, if you have the opportunity, on one hand, you must cultivate a sense of contentment in your heart. Whether you currently own a car, a house, or perhaps you don't have either at this moment, just follow the causes and conditions and let it be. If you can keep this mindset, it actually brings a kind of happiness to your heart. If you lack this mindset and set overly ambitious goals while your abilities are limited, the outcome is bound to be suffering. As we often say, when a person's desires are excessive and this is subtracted by their limited ability, the outcome inevitably is a state of intense suffering. But if your desires are very small and your abilities are quite strong, then you will attain happiness. In other words, some people tend to set extremely high goals for their lives and insist on having 1 million, 10 million, or even 100 million in a short period of time. In fact, striving to reach these goals is very exhausting. We should consider, if I had that much, would it really benefit me, and would it really benefit others? In this regard, Buddhism has some particularly unique insights. To be honest, some of the teachings of Buddhism provide especially meaningful guidance for the restless, anxious, and suffering minds in today's society. They are indeed of great significance. I'm not insisting that everyone must take refuge in Buddhism or must have faith. I'm not saying that at all. But actually, having faith is a positive and meaningful quality. Without faith, people are very likely to do all kinds of bad things. So, many people without faith may not have a sense of security. This is extremely important. Those who have faith in this world are truly the most precious kind of people. Except for a few rare occasions, most people in general have a truly great and genuine respect for those with faith. Even if you don't really have faith, there are many things in Buddhism that are truly worth learning from. For example, Buddhism's view of equality, that everyone is equal. This includes all sentient beings. All living beings have value. This is the Buddhist view of equality. It talks about compassion. Great loving kindness and great compassion. People need to have compassion for one another. People also need to show compassion toward animals and even toward the entire world. In addition, Buddhism also often talks about wisdom. That wisdom can illuminate all things in the world, including our current society as we know it, whether it's the microscopic world or the macroscopic world, as well as the entire Earth, all aspects of geography, and even quantum mechanics and so on. Sometimes when I look into some of the fundamental principles of quantum mechanics, I am truly deeply amazed by the similarity between that and Buddhism. Why is that? Because, for example, as a case in point, Einstein, around 1905, at that time he began to introduce for the first time the theory of relativity. It caused a sensation back then, as people believed that everything arises in dependence. This conclusion was reached by Einstein after many years of research and careful consideration. But in fact, Buddhism had already spoken about this long ago, referring to it as dependent origination and emptiness. If you understand dependent origination and emptiness and the theory of relativity, when you compare the two carefully, you can't help but be amazed that it turns out that in Buddhism, many of the principles that we now essentially refer to in quantum mechanics are explained in incredible detail. Similarly, Buddha has explained all aspects of the microcosmic and macrocosmic worlds in detail. I'm certainly not trying to confuse everyone here by using any sort of complicated Buddhist jargon. That's not the case. It truly is that if we genuinely understand certain core Buddhist principles, especially the teachings on emptiness, we will naturally develop confidence in Buddha's wisdom. Perhaps you have read the Diamond Sutra. It says in the sutra, all conditioned phenomena are like a dream, an illusion, a bubble, a shadow, like dew or a flash of lightning. At first glance, you might wonder, how can everything be like a dream or an illusion? Many people may not necessarily understand this. But if you really take a moment to reflect on it, indeed in the world today, whether it's fame, wealth, status, or relationships, the things people are especially attached to and pursue so fervently, eventually they truly do turn out to be like a dream or an illusion. If you don't believe it, think about the following. Think about the things in life you were so attached to 20 years ago, whether it was money, relationships, or family. Looking back, those things you were so obsessed with. Haven't they now become like a dream? Similarly, when you think about everything that happened before yesterday, you'll see there's really no difference between them and last night's dream. Buddhism does contain especially subtle teachings. If we use worldly wisdom to study and observe these subtle teachings, we truly can't find any sound reasoning or logical basis that could possibly refute them. You absolutely won't find any answer that can overturn them. If you observe with this kind of wisdom, then everything that happens after tomorrow is actually tomorrow's dream. Life is in many ways no different from a dream. When we first hear this, it seems impossible. Right now, I'm really making money. I'm living my life. Nothing is wrong with me, so how could this be a dream? But when you observe it with true reasoning, you have no choice but to admit that life is like a dream or an illusion. Many different things, situations, or occurrences like this often appear or show up in our daily lives. When we face them, actually, the wisdom of Buddhism, it should be said, is the most useful for our daily lives. I'm not here today like someone selling watermelons, just constantly praising the goods. I am not doing self-promoting, saying it is so good if you learn Buddhism. There's no need to advertise here, and I've never thought of doing that. But what specific kind of hope do I truly have in my heart? Many people here should be intellectuals. So as intellectuals, we should understand the truth of things from the positive side. This is very important. Otherwise, nowadays, many people are not very clear about the real situation of Buddhism and may hold misconceptions. In all kinds of news report, whether big or small, and in various media, all these things are blamed on Buddhists. Actually, I admit that among Buddhists, there are good ones, fake ones, and genuine ones. There are also some truly remarkable practitioners. If you really look into it carefully, you'll find that since ancient times, there have been notable figures among Buddhists. Take a look in Chinese Buddhism at biographies of eminent monks of the Tang dynasty and biographies of eminent monks of the Song dynasty. Continued biographies of eminent monks, records of rebirth stories, these works contain a great many examples. Among lay people, there are also many who study Buddhism and are truly remarkable. And among monastics, there are also many. There were such people in the past, and there will be in the future, this is certain. In Tibetan Buddhism, this phenomenon is definitely quite common too. But these achievements are attained through actual practice and realization. So even if those present here have not studied Buddhism, in fact, some of Buddhism's very simple teachings might change many of your perspectives. For example, as I just mentioned, Buddhism teaches that one should not have excessive desires. If your desires are too great, then you will never truly be happy. Or to put it in another simple Buddhist saying, whether it's about relationship or wealth, don't be too attached. The more you're attached, the more you will suffer. Reflecting these words in daily life, even just a sentence can offer great value or inspiration. Where do all the suffering in the world today come from? It comes from attachment. Specifically, it arises from clinging to the self or self-attachment. How many people truly and sincerely suffer for their country, for society, or for the benefit of others? Probably not that many. To be honest, there are few who suffer for others. Most of our pain and tears are shed for ourselves. If you fail to truly understand these profound truths, no matter how high your status is, you may not truly be happy. Even if you become the president of a country, you might still feel uneasy in your heart. Even if you become the richest person in the world, that alone may not lead to true happiness. I often contemplate the Buddhism teachings on impermanence and the ever-shifting nature of happiness. If you haven't truly realized this deep within your heart, it can be very painful. For example, there was once a very famous Japanese entrepreneur named Yoshiaki Tsutsumi. You have probably heard of him as well. Around the year 1990, at the beginning of that period, he attained the status of the world's richest individual. At that time, his assets amounted to approximately $16 billion. It could be said that back then, he owned about 1/6 of all the land in Japan in total. Even the founders of Panasonic and Sony really admired him at the time. Some even said they were unfortunate to have lived in the same era as him, because this man was like the sun, overshadowing the achievements of many others. They had no way to develop. That was just how things were for them then. But later it was said that because many of his actions, as it turned out, were actually illegal, he ended up in prison, suffering greatly. Sometimes we can imagine like this. You become the world's richest person today, holding unimaginable fortune and influence. But ultimately, if you end up in prison despite all your success, how lonely, how miserable and painful that must be. This kind of situation could actually happen to many people. For example, whether you are a leader, a banker, or an entrepreneur today, everyone admires you, celebrates your success, and regards you as a person with status and worth. But after some time, when policies change, and you yourself make some mistakes, what do you turn into in the span of just a single night? That's also possible that you might even end up committing suicide. I heard someone studied at Peking University. It was said he was the child of a minister, and every day he was picked up and dropped off in a Mercedes. At that time, within their circle of classmates, he was someone many of his classmates admired. But later, due to family reasons, his parents ran into trouble. He himself later became an official, but was quickly removed from his position after taking office. After being dismissed, he attempted suicide several times and eventually succeeded. He took his own life. It might seem rare for someone from Peking University to commit suicide, but the truth is the situation was nothing like what it seemed. There are many suicides among Tsinghua University students and Peking University students as well. Why is that? Because they haven't truly found happiness within themselves. When they haven't found it, and problems arise in their life, It is true that they seem very pitiful. For him, everything suddenly vanished in an instant. Sometimes when I see Gaddafi's story, you might wonder, as a monk, why do I care about society? Actually, sometimes from a Buddhist perspective, when observing the world around us, it serves as the best kind of textbook. It is a good way for us to contemplate impermanence by doing that. Take Gaddafi, for example. He was the longtime leader and president of Libya, serving in that position for about 42 years. After such a long time in power, how did he end up dying? At that time, he possessed a huge amount of money. But in the end, even his corpse was in the hands of others when he died. The same can be said of Saddam Hussein. Some people estimated his fortune at 2 billion, but others believed it could be 20 billion. It is not exactly certain how much wealth he actually had. He also ruled for a total of 24 years as the undisputed leader of the nation. Yet in the end, this once powerful king ultimately died at the hands of American soldiers. So people should always keep a sense of impermanence in their lives. You might think perhaps, how could there possibly be impermanence in anything? Right now I'm doing well, living happily. How could something like that happen? But in reality, life is unpredictable and impermanent. Honestly, if we're not truly prepared for many things in our lives, and if we don't understand the true nature of things, it's very likely that in an instant, there are many things that we never even considered or thought possible, which could eventually end up happening to us. Therefore, when you have some time, you should try to learn a little bit about Buddhist teachings. They can offer you new and meaningful perspectives and valuable solutions for your life, as well as your understanding of many things. Sometimes it's true that we may find it hard to resist the trends of society, but we still simply need to move forward. In the past, in the famous Chinese classic Zhuozhuan, there is a phrase, 60 birds flew backward over the capital of Song. What does this mean? Specifically, it refers to 6 birds that are found in the main capital city of the Song state. The wind was blowing strongly in one direction, but they were flying the other way. People didn't understand. Normally birds fly forward, so why were they doing this? But later people realized that because the strong wind was blowing hard ahead, the 6 birds in the group flew forward. But the force of the wind was so great that it kept pushing them back. In fact, they weren't really flying backward, it was the wind that kept blowing them. What does this metaphor mean? It actually refers to the overall trend of society. The way things are going right now doesn't look promising. To be honest, in just a few years, there could very likely be a financial crisis or many other problems. I do not accept the idea that they put forward that the entire world would be destroyed in 2012. From the perspective of Buddhism, Taoism, or any other various historical traditions and schools of thought, such massive natural disasters are not necessarily expected to occur. But human desires have become increasingly too great, and human morality is declining day by day. Many people are seizing all the resources for their own selfish interests. If we look at the present, these things keep appearing in the news. One moment it's the issue of genetically modified foods. Now it seems like people are even afraid to eat grains as if the whole earth has changed into something harmful. Then there's the problem of gutter oil that comes up. After these issues arise, there's no real solution. It just scares people, but as for what we should actually do, there's no clear direction. Especially in big cities, the sense of crisis is naturally emerging for many people now. At this time, on one hand, I think society really needs education in kindness. Without a true education in kindness, perhaps in this society, life will indeed become harder and harder, even though our material conditions may be improving. For example, in big cities, buildings that used to be 20 stories high might become 40 stories high in another 20 years. The car you used to drive cost 200,000 yuan, and in another 20 years, the car you drive might cost 700,000 or 800,000. But by then, happiness may be even harder to find. Approximately 20 years ago, the living conditions in the United States were similar to what we have here now. Many people there were busy, while at that time, Chinese people still had a lot of free time. People genuinely felt a sense of happiness and joy. Whether in tea houses or elsewhere, at least there was still some time to relax. But nowadays, almost everyone living in big cities is busy from the moment they wake up in the morning. By the time they get home at night, they're so exhausted and just collapsed onto the bed, too tired to talk. Then, the next morning, they leave home again, looking worried and unhappy. It's just like an ant colony. Bustling and crowded, coming and going, some even breaking down in tears. Viewed through the lens of Buddhism, such a life exemplifies the truth that human existence is marked by suffering. There is an analogy saying the three realms are unsafe, like a burning house. But to most ordinary people, Buddhism seems too pessimistic. They think it's impossible. They wonder, we are living such happy lives with sunshine and beauty. Did the Buddha not see this? Was everything really just suffering? In fact, the true nature holds many things that are worth contemplating. We shouldn't blindly pursue a certain kind of happiness in our lives. In reality, the root of happiness lies in the sense of contentment within our own minds. It resides in the profound and heartfelt sense of moral elevation within us. In general, if everyone leads a simple life, they should be able to live happily. For example, when Einstein went to a university in the Netherlands, they thought that such a remarkable scientist should be provided with excellent resources. He said he needed nothing special. He said, I just want some milk, some biscuits, and a desk. That alone makes me happy and I don't need anything else. In fact, those who are truly wise, those who are truly nourished spiritually, lack nothing. Everything they seek is already within. But because of our ignorance, we feel we lack everything and have nothing at all. In the end, we are left with nothing. From a Buddhist point of view, the sense of happiness and wealth are not determined by external possessions, but by whether one has cultivated contentment within the heart. As the Buddha taught, a contented person, even if lying on the ground, is still at ease and happy. In contrast, those who are not truly content, even if they are in heaven, still experience suffering. The same principle applies. Some people with a heart full of contentment may sleep in very simple, humble houses. Yet their laughter is truly, genuinely delightful. They subsist on simple meals, just plain tea and humble food. But their laughter is loud and vibrant, echoing with true contentment. On the contrary, without such inner contentment, many people in big cities, reflected even by their complexion, can hardly be seen smiling. What is the reason for this? It is brought about by our desires. That's why we sincerely hope that people can approach Buddhism with an open and positive mindset and come to understand its spiritual essence and wisdom. In fact, why exactly has Buddhism, after nearly 3,000 years, remained in this world throughout such a long history and become a wisdom of human civilization? There are reasons for this. Aristotle once said, anything that exists in this world depends on 4 causes to come into being. The first is the formal cause, which explains the form. The second is the material cause, which refers to the substance. And there's the final cause and the efficient cause. There are 4 causes in total. To illustrate, let's take this table as an example. First, it actually exists in the form of a table, and this is what is called the formal cause. Could you please tell me what is the specific material of this table? It is made of wood, which is referred to as the material cause. It is made by a carpenter. This is called the efficient cause. What is its function? It exists to serve the purpose of being a table. This is known as the final cause. We place things on it, and it serves its function. I often think that throughout its long historical development, Buddhism, unlike science, where later scientists often overturn the views of their predecessors, maintains continuity in its teachings. Buddhist teachings have never become outdated in any era. So it has its own form of existence. Its form is what we mentioned earlier, the formal cause. Whether it is in the form of a monastery or a Buddhist center, whether appearing in the form of monastics or as written scriptures, Buddhism exists in all kinds of different forms. Its material, the true essence of Buddhism, is a kind of education and a kind of wisdom. Many people think, I will never study Buddhism, I don't believe in Buddhism. However, as long as your heart is truly filled with kindness, as long as your heart contains wisdom, compassion, faith, and spirit, these are all part of Buddhist teachings. Buddhist teachings do not contradict the core values found in other religions or outstanding human literature in any way. What Buddhism advocates is that you should be a kind person, and you should make some contributions to society and live with integrity. This kind of thought is what Buddhism promotes the most. This is the very material of Buddhism. I think it's fair to say that this is one way to look at it. What is the efficient cause behind Buddhism? Speaking from the perspective of Buddhism today, the efficient cause was Buddha Sakyamuni turned the Dharma wheel 3 times and thus established it for everyone. Then what is the purpose of Buddhism? The purpose of Buddhism is to bring genuine benefit and lasting happiness to all sentient beings. You might think that the goal of Buddhists is just to shave their heads and live in the mountains. reciting Amitabha Buddha every day, that this might be their purpose. But this is simply a very one-sided view that comes from not understanding Buddhism at all. In fact, the true spirit of Buddhism is a form of wisdom-based education. As for myself, I have to say that for many years, over the course of my life, I've devoted many years to deeply studying and contemplating it. And now I am still learning. I personally think that as long as I have the opportunity in my lifetime, I will keep learning as long as I live, because Buddhist teachings are truly precious. At the same time, I also spend a bit of time learning about other worldly truths and perspectives. Learning is very important. Without learning, our thinking will stagnate. Perhaps many people here would say, I'm too busy, I have to work, how can I find time to study? But actually, if you truly want to learn, it's not that you don't have time because you're too busy. I really believe in what Mr. Lu Xun said. He once said, I would use the time others spent chatting, drinking tea, as well as the time spent eating, to quickly read a few pages of a book. This saying of his, for me, has served as a guiding motto throughout my life, and is something I value very much. I try to spend less time chatting with others, and give up as much as possible on meaningless things like drinking tea or other trivial activities that others engage in. Instead, I read about philosophy of life or truths, whatever it may be. There are many teachings full of wisdom that are worth reading. A lot of TV shows and movies, do they really have much meaning? If they don't have much value and only increase your afflictions and greed, then try to watch less of them. In fact, nowadays many people really lack this kind of wisdom and the knowledge that continually encourages themselves. In fact, if a person keeps learning over time, your wisdom, your kindness, your actions, and your progress will all keep improving. Otherwise, this society truly is full of strong temptations. If you don't read worthwhile books or make helpful friends in your life, or if you don't consciously and actively pursue truly valuable knowledge, it's very likely that in a short time you'll end up going along with the crowd and lose your way. You could get swept up in a particularly frightening current, and in the end, you might just find yourself unable to return at all. That's the situation. Therefore, I sincerely hope that through today's lecture, in some small way, although it's impossible to change our lives in such a short time, I still hope it can change some of our perspectives on life. Even if it's just a little bit, in fact, it's still very necessary. The words from such a brief lecture can't possibly change our eternal environment, but our state of mind can, in fact, be changed. When one's mind is pure, the land they live in is also pure. When the heart is joyful, the world outside will also seem beautiful. Thanks.